Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Yep, still doing pandemic projects, but in this case, this is a viewer submitted reel. This is from Kevin. This is a Ocean City number 112, made in Philadelphia. Beautiful reel. Most of the time you see the Bay City reels or the 112s with the black side plates. This one happens to be red. This one's in beautiful condition. So we're going to show you how to take this apart, how to service it, and how to ensure that it continues to fish for quite some time. I've done some initial testing on it just to make sure everything's working fine, and it is. So this is really just about cleaning it up and getting it back out there fishing again. So these Ocean City reels are always tight around the handle, and there's not much you can do about it. It's just kind of the way that the material ages on that. But the only thing you can do is put some penetrating oil on there and kind of free it up. There is an oil port here, and you could also try putting a little bit of oil in there, but for the most part I've had very little success in doing anything that has any lasting to it. But let's push that little oil port in there, put a little bit of oil in there, see if we can't help this one along, and we'll get started here. So getting started means a couple of things. I like to tell you that I wear a protective glove on my hand. That's to keep the contaminants off, and there's a lot of contaminants. Unfortunately today I've had a lot of them on my bench and the like, and as you work on a lot of these, it just becomes annoying if nothing else. So I like to keep that there. I use a parts tray, sometimes the bottom of a fast food container, sometimes the bottom of a milk jug. Whatever I find that seems to suit it is fine, and what it helps me to do is keep track of everything I take off. And that's one way to ensure that everything that goes back on goes on in the right place and that there's nothing left over or missing. Also like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's involved in trying to keep us safe during the pandemic. That's our essential workers, everything from public servants to food store, grocery folks, and teachers and everybody else, as well as all of our medical and health professionals, whether it's in the hospital or in a healthcare environment, or just simply in a general practice trying to keep us away from the pandemic and the coronavirus. All right, so thank you very much. We're going to move on now. I just took the handle off. One of the things that's neat about the Ocean City is that the wrench comes right with it most of the times. There's a few times you'll find that it doesn't, but most of the time it just screws right into the handle. You can remove that and that becomes your wrench. We're going to take off our star adjuster. And these reels were around for a very long time. These were, interestingly enough, the lower end of the price point for the Ocean City reels. They generally were in the $6 to $10 range at the time. They were around in the 30s through the 50s. Anything that's branded as Ocean City was made before 1957, so this one's in beautiful condition for that period of time. And if you see Ocean City True Temper, that's after 1957. I believe somewhere in the early 60s they dropped Ocean City completely, and it just became the True Temper brand. True Temper was a conglomerate that did all kinds of sporting goods, golf clubs and the like, so it kind of fit their profile. And when Ocean City was sold to True Temper, they started branding the reels that way. All right, there's three screws on the bottom. Those screws are shorter than the ones that go into the cross posts, so I set them to one side so that I don't confuse them when I go on the back end of this. And this was an enduring design. This design lasted, 30 years at least. Ocean City, I think, first made the reel in 1927, if I'm not mistaken. It could be a little bit this way or that way of it. And I've got a story to tell on Ocean City, just haven't been there yet. But I am going to do a history of Ocean City reels. And when I do that, we'll fill you in on all of it. But essentially, it was a sporting goods company in Philadelphia, and they wanted to make some fishing reels for their sporting goods company. They initially contracted with some folks, and then eventually they just went into the manufacturer themselves. And it seems, for whatever reason, it's most famous for having the founder of Penn work for them. So Ocean City made a decent reel, and at the time, as I mentioned, this is a $6 or $8 reel, depending on pre-war, post-war kind of a thing, and that was a lot of money in the day. And actually, one of the things that made Penn successful was Penn was able to produce the reel with a different design for less cost. So it became popular that the Penn reels outsold the Ocean City reels, kind of like the student beating the master, right? All right, so I've just done a little bit of cleaning here. There was some old grease on that click ratchet and the spool, so we got rid of that. I put some grease on the other side, and now we're just going to simply reinsert that. The click ratchet looks hardly used, so whoever was fishing this reel, chances are, did not fish with that click on too much. All right, we'll just put a little bit on here just for fun and just to keep it rolling when we do the rest of this reel. There's two sides to this reel then. There is the upper side, which has the spool gear, and it has the yoke and jack. That moves in by pulling this out. And actually, this is a bump if you wanted to do it that way. I've never done it that way, but if you take your handle and you rotate your handle like this, when it bumps that ratchet, it kicks it in. So that was actually designed that way, but of course you can do it just like everybody else does it and just kind of clip it up. One of the things I found interesting was early on in my reel repair career, people were bringing me into reels with this thing broken off. And I kept asking them, why is it broken off? They said, well, it got stuck when I was going to do this, trying to pull it forward. And I guess they forced it, or they did whatever. They wrenched it, maybe, to unstick it. Maybe they went like this. And of course, that's not the way this works. And they just tore it off. But if you have one of these, note that that is the way that this works. All right, these are in two stages here. You have two screws to the bottom, and you have an assembly up top for the yoke assembly. You do not need to remove these two screws here, which are on the top. So that's different than a Penn reel. You want to grab the screws from the bottom. Those you do need to remove because those are holding the bridge in. And then generally, you cannot remove this bridge without removing the yoke assembly first. So, when you find that your screwdriver is inadequate, get the right screwdriver for the occasion. Don't try and do this with the smaller blade in a wide hole. One, you'll lose the leverage until you butterfly that the slot. Okay, when you pull up on this now, this is sitting in a groove in those two sides. All you do is pull up on the yoke like that. You'll notice you have two small springs that are nested in the cavities here. And then that will release the yoke, the spool gear behind it, two bigger springs which fit over the little studs here. And that's why you don't need to remove these. Now, if for some reason you took them out, not knowing that, don't worry. But make sure that when you go to reinstall these pieces, that that slot is facing in. If it's not facing in, you won't be able to slide this into position. Now, this is without all the assemblies, but that's how it slides, and it needs those grooves on the inside in order to do that. Okay, well, we took those pieces out, put them in my parts tray. We can now remove the rest of the assembly. The trim ring comes off. You can push through on the... Oops, that's a good point here. Sometimes these have different types of anti-reverse dogs. This one has a little trigger thing, so it was a good thing I didn't get ahead of myself there. With that that spring, you want to hold that, just kind of sort of take it out easily. It's like a bullet. This thing will shoot if you don't take care to notice. So it's a little stud, rides inside the spring, and this one is nested into the side plate right in this. This is your anti-reverse dog. And that little anti-reverse is nested into this little hole here. We'll show you when we go to reinstall. Okay, now we can take the main gear out. we want to clean up the inside of the jacket. And again, for all of the times that you see Ocean City reels, most of the time you see the black side-plated ones. There's some silver ones out there. I don't think the silver ones are in the 920 series. I'm sorry, the 112 series. I think they're in the 900 series. And a lot of these you'll see, again, they'll have the True Temper brand, which is one of the ways to tell the aging on your reel. Okay, that's cleaned of the old grease. Now this, depending on what this setup is, this setup can be, if you need the drag washers, it can be the pen drag washers for the most part, interestingly enough. All right, we want to push that little stud out so we can get the gear sleeve off, just like a pen, but this came first. Remember, don't think Ocean City was copying the pen. If anything, it went the other way around. Cleaning off the old grease on that bridge. Now we can remove the gear sleeve. We're going to come in from behind here, see what we have in terms of washers. And we just have one big washer, which is another indication of age. This is a cosmetic piece here, probably asbestos or cork. And you just kind of have to be careful with these. They've been stuck here for a while, it seems. So what we're trying to do is unstick it without breaking it. Now if you wanted to, you could replace this, or if you needed to, you could have it replaced. We'll be able to judge in a moment here. Yeah, this one's solid. It's cork, and you want to make sure that you clean this out inside here. So one big drag washer, and again, that's pretty much identical to a pen drag washer. So if you needed to or wanted to, you could go ahead and put that put the replacements in using the Pen 60 drag washer. I'm just pressing that back in. You want to make sure that this is clean, because this is the only thing really that's going to provide you with that drag slip. So if there's any residual on that, go ahead and clean it off. I'm using some steel wool here to polish it. The top doesn't matter much, but why not clean it at the same time? This is the top. And you could use a little oil on the cork. Go ahead and put some on there. That'll just keep it fresh and keep it from tearing. Press that down. Okay, so we've reset our main gear. Put a piece on there. Take the cap washer, same idea, make sure it's clean. And this one's in good condition throughout, so that's nice to see. We're going to take our bridge now, put a little bit of grease onto that. Keep that flowing free. We'll put that whole assembly back on here. And you got to get that little pin, and this is where that parts tray helps. You don't lose little pieces like this. If you need a little assist, go grab a pliers to pull that pin in. That pin has got to clear the shoulder here. If it doesn't clear that shoulder, well, we put the gear on first, but if it doesn't clear that shoulder, you wouldn't be able to get that gear back on. Healthy dose of grease. This hasn't seen grease in a while. Folks ask me what I use. I use Pen Precision Reel Grease. Doesn't matter what grease you use. This one comes in a tub, but if you're doing fishing reels, please use fishing reel grease. All right, this is all set up now. I'll clean up the yoke and the little transition piece to the spool gear. Notice on the yoke that you have a prong on the back of it. If you've taken all of these apart, that prong faces backwards away from the carrier here. So when you go to reinstall, don't put the prong on the front side of this or the facing side to you. Kind of hard to say what a front side is, but it goes this way where the grooves that accept the spool are the one side. Just make sure that as you go to reinstall that, you've done it correctly. Okay, so it's time to reinstall now, and I know initially what I told you was you don't have to take these off, and you don't, but I'm going to take the one off on this side because it just makes installing that anti-reverse dog a little bit easier. I'm not even going to put that in my parts tray. I'm just going to leave it out because it will be going right back in. So just make sure again it's clean. You see there's a little bit of dirt debris left there. Get some grease onto that main gear. I tried a little bit earlier to put some on, but let's just make sure we got a good dose of that. Here's the anti-reverse dog. Okay, so what you want to do to install the anti-reverse dog, take one of your bridge screws over to that side, bring your main gear assembly on a tilt. Oops. So bring it in, but tilt it a little bit so that you have access to your cavity there. Now you've got a spring and a little silver bullet here. Actually, it's a gold bullet. That gold bullet belongs inside the spring, like that. And, let's start again. So off to the side so that you can have access to your little hole. Screw comes up, anti-reverse dog goes in, and then the spring assembly with the dog. The dog has a little ear on it that'll accept the spring. You gotta be very careful here because this spring will shoot. So you have the anti-reverse dog, you have that metal point on there, and you have the spring compressed behind it. And again, what we did was we removed the one tie down for your jack just to make it a little bit easier there. I've done it without removing them, but that's probably not the way to have you do it. So that's one side. Let's get the other bridge screw in. And before I go any further, I'm just going to test. Make sure it's working. And it's working fine. Alright, now we can reinstall this. Remember what I said, there's a groove in here. The groove goes to the inside, kind of facing the groove on the other piece, and that's where this jack is going to ride. And you can adjust it a little bit if it's out of sorts. Okay, two big springs go over that. Two small springs go in the cavities above. You can, at this point, you can grab that free spool release. And now we want the yoke and the spool gear or pinion gear. And you want to make sure you get the grease onto those pieces as well. Once you do that, and take your assembly, set it over those two pillars, push down so that you have the clearance to those slots. Take your jack and slide it in, and then from behind put your free spool release bar in. Align the hole on the free spool bar with your hole in the jack there. Take your screwdriver and start tightening down. Now, one of the ways I find it's not foolproof, but it's probably the best way I find. Pull your lever all the way out at this point and then tighten down to the point where it's tight. If you don't do that, if you leave it up, there's actually more that you can turn, and then you won't have this perform properly. So do it that way, pull it out, tighten down, and then snap it out, and just test it to make sure that it is pulling that little collar off so that you can have a free spool, which we do. And then so it's time to reinstall at this point. Take that trim ring, line the holes up. For some reason that little metal slot wants to just keep sliding on me. And if you pull your free spool release it off by one. Pull that free spool release out, and that will help you bring these close. That happens to work that way on a pen reel as well. If you throw it in a free spool, takes the tension off the spool. All right, the long screws go to the outside. Short screws go in the reel seat. And I like to do this kind of in a rotating fashion here. And on the reel seat, I generally don't like to tighten them all down until I have the 3 in there, because it's like a rocking horse. It's got a bow in it. Sometimes one goes high, one goes low for whatever reason. So I like to make sure all 3 are in before I tighten them down. And this is a good example of it right there. This one needs to go down a little bit. So if you put some pressure down, I just felt it move down there, you should be able to align that hole. There we go. And once you have all 3 of them set, then go ahead and tighten them down. I should have 2 more screws. And I'm looking at my parts tray and I have 2 more screws. That's always a good thing. When you have too few or too many, it makes you worry. In this case, we got the right number. One on this side, and then we'll be able to just tighten it up, give it a test drive. So it was working nicely before. Now it's all been cleaned and lubed, reinstalled. And that's kind of the idea. So folks ask how frequently you should do this. My recommendation is to do it annually. I don't care if you do it before the season starts or when you're kind of wrapping the season up. But try to get to it annually. It's not a good idea to put the things in the storage with the old grease and that, so maybe at the end of the season would be a good idea. If you fish these reels heavy, you'll notice I'm holding that collar with a Phillips head screwdriver. That way I don't mar the threads inside for the handle nut. If you fish it heavy, then maybe a mid-season break there, take it apart and spend the 20 minutes or so tuning it up. Wouldn't be a bad idea. But generally you can get away with it over the course of a season, unless you're out there every day fishing, in which case you probably should tune it up midpoint. All right, and then we can just use our handle wrench right here for this. Like I said, one of the things I credit Ocean City with is a nice design here where you can pretty much use your wrench and then just stow it right in the handle, just like that. All right, time for a test drive. Always good to start it in free spool, give it a spin. And all those years later, what a beautiful spinning action it is, true to everything. Bring it up, crank it. That spool is a little tight. We put some additional grease in there, so just back that up a little bit. There you go. So we have a nice reel. There should be a little bit of play in the spool. For whatever reason, this one's kind of, there we go. It's not sharp enough. You just want a little bit of side-to-side play, and that's what you got. All right, and then if you wanted to bang it, you can bang it shut. It's not a problem. All right, so there you go. That's Kevin's Ocean City 112 in a beautiful red jacket, cleaned and ready to go fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, again, like I mentioned earlier, please subscribe. And finally, if you have any questions on reel repair, you can leave them in the comment section. I try to get back to everybody who leaves a question. Doesn't have to be on this particular reel. Maybe you're stuck on something and you need a little bit of help. Just leave that comment and I'll try and help you out. And then, of course, if you have a reel that needs service or repair and you don't want to do it yourself, well then drop me a line on the information on the business card that follows. I'll be happy to provide you with that information. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.